Interstate 35 in and of itself is not only one of the most important north to south corridors in the DFW area, it's also the single most important north to south corridor in the state of Texas and one of a handful of highways that directly connect Canada and Mexico at its northern and southern terminuses. With the rapid growth of the DFW Metroplex, I-35E serves as a vital north to south corridor for the Dallas side of the DFW Metroplex, with 35 serving the Fort Worth side. Now what's going on, everyone? My name's Cool Titanium 68, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about the Stemmons Freeway rebuild. Now, before we actually dive into this, yes, I know it's been, 3 months since I've last posted a highway video, and there's actually a good amount of y'all that are like, I'm anticipated to see what this is going to be, because, well, for some of us like me, we drive this corridor the whole time. So I know it's been a while. It's mainly just been a lot of like planning and how I want to get stuff done, but honestly, now I'm just like, let's just get this done with. Stemmons Freeway is a segment of I-35 East, basically running north of downtown Dallas. Time has gone on with this highway. It's become a vital north to south corridor for a lot of industrial companies. From downtown Dallas all the way north to the Sam Rayburn Tollway, warehouses line both sides of I-35 East along Stemmons Freeway, bringing in a lot of freight traffic. However, most of what we'll be talking about is going to be between north of Interstate 635 and ending at US Highway 380 in Denton. What we're going to be talking about is going to start from right here at the 635-35 East interchange, going all the way up to the northwest, past the 35 East-West interchange, and at US Highway 380. So this is about a 27-mile long corridor, if I'm correct. Nonetheless, this serves as a vital north to south corridor for cities along the west side of Lake Lewisville between Dallas and Denton. Mind y'all, Denton has been around for over a century and a half, with the creation of UNT in 1890 and Texas Women's in 1901. It's an important corridor linking Denton to Dallas, as well as the eastern half of the DFW Metroplex, with I-35 West connecting Denton to Fort Worth, as well as the western half of the DFW Metroplex. Now, planning for most of Stemmons Freeway, yes, this also includes Lower Stemmons, which for those of you that don't know, that is Stemmons Freeway between the 183 I-35 interchange and downtown Dallas. This all started back in 1952. Now, this highway was to replace US Highway 77, as most of I-35 did through the United States. Throughout this 28-mile stretch of Stemmons Freeway, this highway would open up in segments throughout the late 50s. The first segment opened between Denton and Corinth and completely replaced US Highway 77 from what is today the US 77 splits. So that is this right here, all the way down to Swisher Road right here. The second segment to open would extend southward from Swisher, going over Lewisville Lake and ending up the present day 121 business intersection. Mind y'all, Sam Rayburn Tollway was built in the 90s, and this was in the 50s. So this is where State Highway 121 was located at that time. Now, through 1957, Stemmons Freeway would then extend southward and meet up at I-635, with the last segment of this highway opening in Denton on June 25th, 1959, connecting 35 east and west on the southwest side of Denton and aligning I-35 on the west side. Now, it wouldn't be until 1963 when the whole entirety of I-35 East north of Dallas would follow its current route. Most of Stemmons Freeway in and around downtown Dallas would open between May and December of 1959, but the last segment would take about 3 more years to open. This would explain why exit 435 for Harry Hines Boulevard, as original plans call for I-35 East to follow Harry Hines from just south of Northwest Highway up to 635. Now, that segment is going to be right along here. So right at this big I-12 interchange, that this would basically kind of almost on the very northwest corner of Love Field, and it would follow all the way up northwest to here. Hence, that also explains why Harry Hines kind of curves around here, but it kind of looks like it could just go straight to the northwest. Eventually, as the U.S. Department of Transportation would grant more funding for road construction, the city of Dallas would look to shift I-35 east a couple thousand feet from the west of the current alignment of Harry Hines. Again, if you want to know more about I-35 in general, I've already made a video going over both stretches of I-35 as well as an overview of the I-35E's construction projects. The playlist of this interstate is will be down in the description below if you want to take a look. And while you're down there, make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe button so more people are informed about what's going on along Interstate 35 in DFW. Now, coming back to present time, again, this project has been split into 3 segments to cover the entire 28-mile segment. These segments are known as the South, Middle, and North segments. Now, the South segment would start at the 635 interchange and would go all the way up to Bush Turnpike. Technically, this is supposed to end at the Denton County line, which I believe is sandwiched right in between George Bush and Sam Rayburn, so best to just keep it at George Bush because that old area between George Bush and 121 is going to be a whole heck of a mess to try and do even at this point. Now, the middle segment, again, would go from I-35 east, north of George Bush, up to Farm and Market 2181, also known as Swisher Road, which would include the bridges over Louisville Lake. And then the north segment would go from Swisher Road up to US Highway 380. Now, if we really want to go all the way back, project planning for this began with the Stemmons Major Transportation Investment Study, or MTIS, back in 1998. Now, this study focused on relief traffic off of I-35 East and would include many different alternatives, most of which were studied anyways. Some of these would include widening of FM 423. So when they talk about 423, this is going to be the road here on the very east side of Lake Louisville. It's known as Main Street up to here, and then it just sticks with the name 423 coming up to 380, where it then just curves to the west and turns into Fishtrap. That was one idea that they were looking at, and which they already did anyways. That is now a 6-lane road. Another thing that they looked at is FM 2499 on the west side of I-35 East, and this pretty much is present-day Village Parkway leading up to I-35, where it then turns into Mayhill and then hits US Highway 380. But again, it's Village Parkway up until Justin, where it turns into Long Prairie, where it has a direct connection onto State Highway 121. On top of this, they also recommended a rail line along this corridor, and this would ultimately lead to the creation of the Denton County Transit Authority in 2002, which lies from the Dart Trinity Mill Station in Carrollton, located on the southeast side of I-35 East and the Bush Turnpike. And when I'm talking about that is going to be this one right down here. Where is it? Yeah, sorry, here. It's this one. So this and these two are the 2 DCTA trains that lie on the same alignment as the Dart Green Line. Now, mind you, the DCTA A train also heads northward all the way up to downtown Denton. As y'all can see with this black line, it kind of swirls around and heads up here. Now, this follows a former DGNO freight rail corridor because this connects the Union Pacific main north to south line that goes up from downtown Fort Worth to downtown Denton, two more DGNO's freight rail corridor along the Green Line as it heads down to Love Field and the Trinity Rail Express. The DCTA A train itself actually lies alongside DART-owned right-of-way, so they technically have to have DART's permission whenever they have to do work alongside the A train. Nonetheless, we'll talk about that in a completely different video. Don't worry about the whole stuff about the A train there. Now, with the first transportation study came almost 13 years of planning before environmental clearance was given for all 3 segments between 2011 and 2012. Now, why did this take 13 years? I mean, if you guys have watched any of my other videos, especially on 380, it took them, 3 years to look at the 380 feasibility study in Collin County, and then it took another 3 years to do all the environmental clearance. This was because in the late 2000s, TxDOT decided to propose a new design for the expanded I-35 East, and this would culminate into 19 stakeholder meetings over 18 months throughout the late 2000s. Basically starting in August of 2008, with the last meeting being held in January of 2010. Now, leading into these stakeholder meetings, I-35 East was an 8-lane highway between 635 and George Bush Turnpike, a 6-lane highway between Bush Turnpike and Swisher, and a 4-lane highway from Swisher Road up to 380. The initial plans brought up in the early 2000s was to widen the south and middle segments to a 10-lane highway with a pair of reversible toll lanes, with the north segment widening to an 8-lane highway in general with no toll lanes. The schematics from the south and north segment were approved in late 2005, with the middle segment schematics being approved a year and a half later in 2007. All three segments already had their environmental assessments completed between 2005 and 2007, respectively. Now, again, at this point, I think they had realized just how fast everyone was moving up north, hence why we're coming to the first public stakeholder meeting on August 6, 2008. Now, instead of different designs for each segment, they decided to have a completely unified design for all three segments, meaning that the north segment would get a substantial increase in lane numbers to account for the growth in North Texas. There was a lot at stake because the highway still needed substantial funding. Mind you, this is an almost $5 billion project that they're looking to do, basically completely rebuilding 28 miles of I-35. Now, at this point, $535 million has been set aside from the 121 concession payment from the NTTA. For those that don't know, the first segment of the San Rayburn Tollway, which bypasses Louisville to the south and east, was funded and built using taxpayer money. I think I talked about this in our video over San Rayburn Tollway, but I don't think what I told y'all is that they did get a toll reconcession payment, because since the Texas DOT had already funded this, and then the NTTA basically just took over the operations, finance, and maintenance of the San Rayburn Tollway, they still had to pay back the Texas Department of Transportation for what they've already built. Coming into the second public meeting, which was held on October 1st, 2008, so just under 2 months later, they had done a couple things beforehand. At that point, the Texas DOT had developed a preliminary financial feasibility study for the new design that was given to the NTTA on September 2nd, 2008. Now, why would they want this? This was because our Texas DOT was looking to the NTTA to manage and operate the I-35 Managed Lanes project, and the NTTA was the one that requested said feasibility study. The NTTA had a board meeting 2 weeks later on September 17th and decided to waive primacy, meaning the NTTA would not take part on this project. Rightfully so. Now, over the next few months, the DOT would work with other city leaders to accommodate the new 4224 highway design. This means 4 southbound general purpose lanes, 2 southbound toll lanes, 2 northbound toll lanes, and 4 general purpose northbound lanes. The plan was to have the modified design work complete by December of that year, where TxDOT's Dallas district would send the schematics to TxDOT themselves in Austin, as well as the Federal Highway Administration for review in December, with a public hearing scheduled for summer and fall of 2009, and hopefully they would get a finding of no significant impact by the end of 2009. With that, the next public stakeholder meeting was scheduled for November 5th, and at that time, again, there were more modifications done to the I-35 East corridor. Schematic work was now about 30% complete at this point, and could start going into some of the environmental process. Now, most of the environmental process would be worked on once the schematics would hit 60% completion rate, which is expected to be done later that month on November 26th. The next meeting was then set for December 3rd, where stakeholders would get to see the 60% complete schematics. And then after this meeting in December, meetings were then held bi-monthly. Now, as I said before, the 60% complete schematics were handed out to everyone at that stakeholder meeting, and they did update the timeline as the draft environmental assessment was now scheduled to be handed to Austin in March of 2009. Now, I believe that I had said that they were going to try and get their whole thing done by December of that year, and they would have public hearings scheduled for that time. Now, it looks like, as they had said, they wanted to try and have their environmental assessment in early to Austin. They were still expecting environmental clearance by December of 2009, but it was still going to be a very tight schedule. When it comes to the start of right-of-way, TxDOT would ask that cities hold off on acquiring right-of-way until environmental clearance was given. They would also be updating the cost estimates at the 90% complete schematic mark and would give future updates at the February 4th meeting. At that February 4th meeting, they would then have a plan for the environmental analysis documents. Mind you, they have to do 3 separate environmental assessments. They have to do one for each different segment. The north segment had its own, the center segment had its own, and the south segment had its own. Now, the plan was they were going to send the middle segment first, then followed by the south, and then the north segments respectively. Because the plan was to send the middle segment environmental analysis first, TxDOT was expected to have a public hearing sometime in either August or September of 2009 before obtaining environmental clearance for the middle segment by December of 2009. The 95% draft schematic was sent to Austin 2 days prior on February 2nd, and the draft environmental assessment for the middle segment was expected to be sent to Austin in March. The other 2 segments were expected to receive their finding of no significant impact sometime in early 2010. This meeting was also the first time that they had discussed a phased financial plan for this project, as they were still well over $2 billion short of funding for the whole project. Now, the next meeting after this would be held on May 9th, and at that point, they had given an update on the middle environmental assessment, which was submitted on April 30th, with the north expected to be submitted sometime later in May, and the south assessment in June. At this point, they were working on financing for this project and discussed financing procurement from 3 separate projects that had been approved: the North Southern Express in Fort Worth, the LBJ Express in Northwest Dallas, and the DFW connector just north of DFW Airport, all of which were $2 billion each, except for the DFW connector, which costed $1.5 billion. Now, all of these use what are known as collective distributive agreements. So they were all public-private partnerships where the DOT would design everything, like they would design the whole projects, but then there would be then the private sector would fund, operate, and maintain those projects. That is how the North Southern Express was built. That is how the LBJ Express was built. And funny enough, that was how the DFW connector was built. For those who don't know what DFW connector is, that is basically what is now the new interchange for 121, 114, and the western terminus of 635. Basically acting on the very northwest side of DFW Airport. At that May 9th meeting, they were going to work with KPMG to construct the first phase of this project, since they were nowhere near the amount of money needed to build the whole project. Yeah, it was at this point where they realized they're going to have to do this in phases, just because a whole $5 billion, that's a lot. And even today, like, we'll talk about some of the different parts because there's just that much that's going on. Now, at the next meeting on August 6th, there was a big win from the state legislature. In one of the bills, the legislature authorized the use of $2 billion in new money, half of which went to the state infrastructure bank, with the remaining $1 billion going to Texas DOT. $400 million of that was allocated for the metropolitan areas, and $144 million was allocated to the DFW area. Also at this meeting, they had came up with 4 different options for financing this project. The first idea was known as the pay-as-you-go method. What they would do here is they would use the $535 million toll concession money for the right-of-way acquisition, and decide whether or not to use what's known as a design-build contract or a design-bid-build contract. So with this is they would design something for design-bid contracts. They would design it, and then basically they just build it. Design-bid-builds basically acts as another step in between the design and the construction, in the start of construction, where they would then just see they'll go out to different construction contractors and be like, all right, who can give us like the cheapest thing, who can get this for us the cheapest way. And again, here they would have to identify the segments with the highest priority to be built, and other segments would be built when, Congress provides new revenue streams. The second option was a request for a concession CDA authority. Again, comprehensive development authorities allow for private sectors to take on significant design, finance, construction, and maintenance responsibilities for this project. If I remember right, I would believe that the DOT would do most of the design work, but the finance, construction, and maintenance would be done by the private side. With this, again, they would have to develop a corridor delegation that would educate state officials on the need for this highway project. If successful, they would work construction contracts by 2011 or 2012. I believe that is what they did with the Techspress. I know they did that with the LBJ Techspress projects. That corridor delegation was the LBJ Infrastructure Group, and once that whole thing was complete, the whole thing dissolved, and it is now being basically maintained by Cintra because the Texas, I think NTTA was like, yeah, no, we can't do that. The third option would be a design, build, finance, operate method. Now, this is a little bit more simple. What this would do is allow for the contractor to earn payments during construction. So as they're fully building out the highway, the DOT would still continue to pay them for probably the next 20, 30 years. The revenue risk would be retained by TxDOT and the region within the right of in the region with right-of-way acquisition starting in 2010, and then construction would be start in 2011 or 2012. Now, this last option would be the pass-through finance authority. Now, TxDOT already has this kind of authority. What this does is act similar to that design, build, finance, operate method, where TxDOT will then give the contractors the $535 million up front and then pay them back over 15, 20 years just from the toll revenue, which I'm gonna point right. I'm gonna point a little bit this way because I'm looking directly outside, and I am like the outdoor window that I have my computer set up literally looks right at I-35. There's no toll roads that come up this high up towards Denton, but eventually it will. Now, the next stakeholder meeting would be held just 2 weeks later in the city of Louisville. Here, they would have to prioritize the middle segment when it came to financing. Now, why you may ask, again, with this entire project costing about $4.3 billion at this time, the middle segment alone was going to cost just under half the total cost at about $1.9 billion. Total cost would come out to $652 million for the entire project, or at least for the right-of-way is how much that would be. Their plan was to figure out how to build out the whole project if they can't build the entire $4.3 billion project altogether. Again, they would gain environmental clearance through 2010 for all three segments and would start working on these projects. A series of public meetings are held through 2010 and 2011 to inform the public of what is about to be done to I-35 East. The first meeting was held on November 8th, 2010 for the middle segment, and at this meeting they showed that I-35 was going to be widening to have 8 general purpose lanes, again with 4 concurrent toll lanes from Sam Rayburn Tollway to FM 2181, with the section between Sam Rayburn and George Bush Turnpike going to 6 general purpose lanes and 4 concurrent toll lanes, but will also include 4 collector distributor lanes in each direction. Middle segment alone would cost $1.6 billion. Now with the South public meeting was the next one that was held on September 27th, 2011, with a lot of the same presentation as the middle segment, except this segment was expected to cost about $831 million. Now, the North public meeting was held on October 10th, 2011, and will give a more detailed look as to how the full build-out would play out for this area. Now, between FM 2181 and US 77, the highway would be the same as all the others, 8 general purpose lanes with 4 concurrent toll lanes. Between 77 and 377, I-35E would slim down to 2 concurrent toll lanes, just 1 in each direction, not now where it's reversible, but it would still keep the 8 lanes. However, west of 377 to the I-35 east to west interchange, which technically is what I am looking at right now, the highway would slim down to 6 general purpose lanes with the 2 concurrent toll lanes. Past the interchange and heading north to US Highway 380, I-35 itself would be widened to 10 general purpose lanes and 4 concurrent toll lanes. With the full plans out there, it was then time to build out the first phase of construction. Now, before we go talk about the construction, I did want to say that I forgot to put this on here. The reason why that I-35 would become a 10-lane highway with 4 concurrent toll lanes is because the full build-out of I-35 West, which was complete, all the environmental work and the feasibility study was done back in 2017. This 35 West would be widened to 6 general purpose lanes and 2 concurrent toll lanes north of the current North Tarrant Express. At the start of construction, TxDOT was able to garner about $1.4 billion in funding for the first phase. Again, in this phase, this added 1 general purpose lane in each direction for the middle and north segments, while adding 2 reversible managed toll lanes in the south and middle segments. In the north segment, the full general purpose lane build-out was extended to northbound Post Oak Drive, or at least the northbound exit at Post Oak Drive. So when I'm talking about that, this right here is Post Oak Drive. What I'm talking about is going to be this exit here. So the entrance, so the Post Oak Drive entrance and exit ramps just north of Corinth Parkway is where they decided to end the 8 lanes for this corridor. On top of this, they would rebuild the southbound 35 East Bridge. So I don't know if they have it that well on here. Not really. Well, I mean, a little bit. So this right here is the main bridge for 35. It looks like this because, if I remember right, this carried both lanes at one point. So then they built the new southbound bridge, which, as y'all can look that that's kind of what it looks like on street view. You can't really see the northbound, what the northbound view looks like on street view, because once you get to here, that thing is pretty much blocked off. Nonetheless, this was built with the first phase of the whole of the I-35 rebuild. This would allow for 8 general purpose lanes to be built, as well as a pair of frontage road lanes coming onto that southbound bridge going over Lake Lewisville. Now, construction for this would start in 2013 and then end in 2017. Over the years, the middle and north segment has seen multiple intersections rebuilt. These would include the UNT pedestrian bridge that's actually with it. That's something I can see from here. As well as the North Texas Boulevard intersection, which is right in front of my apartment. McCormick Street, which is the next intersection down from here. Let's see if I can remember any more. We've got Post Oak Street, which was rebuilt. You have Corinth that was rebuilt. Hundley Drive was rebuilt. Oak Drive, Garden Ridge, Lake Park, and Fox Avenue. This is the Fox Avenue Bridge. And I mean, you theoretically could do this whole thing. I mean, actually, I think you can. Okay, never mind. On my script, I had said that they might need to replace or at least rebuild that bridge. But then if you look over here, you've got a significant amount of right-of-way here that hasn't been touched, which what'll most likely happen is once they finish the Main Street intersection rebuild, which again we'll talk about in a little bit. I would believe that when they finish out the whole Main Street intersection rebuild, which would also include the rebuild of the northbound 35 East lanes, basically from Fox, I believe, coming up to Valley Ridge, then they're probably going to look at probably repaving all of this. But that's most likely going to come later because they're still working on infrastructure work along here, which is another separate project. Again, that we'll talk about. And as I said before, there's a handful of intersections along the middle segment that are being worked on as we speak. And as I showed before, that included the Main Street interchange and then the 121 Business and Corporate Drive intersections is a part of one whole project through Lewisville that looks to rebuild pretty much, I believe, would be the frontage roads and some of the lanes from Fox Avenue all the way down south past Corporate to what will most likely be just before Hebron, or what'll probably be just south of Timber Creek as they rebuild probably both of those bridges. Not 100% sure. Taking a look at some of the current projects, let's see if I can actually open up the Texas DOT's page, because what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to go to the Dallas district. I'm going to open up projects by county. Let's look at Denton County, and then I'm going to, well, unfortunately I can't show you guys a handful of the project. I can't show you guys the projects on here because it looks like they have started putting out the Q4 2025 construction projects pages for all the stuff within the Dallas district. So I can't show you guys the Denton County side, but we're going to kind of talk about it. But starting off with, I'm going to talk to you guys about the 35 East-West interchange and what they're doing there. Now, the first thing we're going to talk about is going to be what is from the I-35 East to West interchange, basically starting right here at North Texas Boulevard, going northward up to US 77, which is right up here. Now, the plan for this is to have at least 6 lanes along I-35, but then also, like, shift the lanes out farther out, at least shift the southbound lanes farther out for I-35, rebuild the Bonnie Bray Bridge, but also rebuild the but then build brand new flyover ramps for this interchange. Now, what is this going to do? This is going to shift the I-35 West / Bonnie Bray interchange about 1,000 feet farther to its south. And as of right now, the southbound exit for North Texas is no more. And that is because since they have finished, and they don't actually show it on here because, well, they don't update these photos very often. Nonetheless, as I'm about to say, because they have finished building out the new southbound frontage road from Bonnie Bray to North Texas, they've been able to tear out the old frontage road, and then they're going to start working to dig this out, build out a new retaining wall, and then eventually they will shift the southbound lanes farther south. Now, on top of this, what they've also done is they've built they're building a new flyover ramp going over I-35 in general. So this whole northbound 35 east to southbound 35 west is getting a brand new, really tall flyover ramp. I believe there is a new flyover ramp coming for northbound 35 west to southbound 35 east. I'm not 100% sure. I wouldn't be surprised if they do, just because if they do, they need to redeck at least here. They need to repave a lot of this area. But why they're doing this is so that they can set up this whole area to become a 10-lane highway in the very far future. And I say far future because it's probably going to take a good 25, 30 years before it's actually going to be built. But what they are going to do is, I know they're building a new flyover ramp here. I'm not 100% sure if this is going to be a new exit for Oak Street right over here, or if this is going to be something different. So this whole bridge here has been torn out, and the reason for that is because they're going to build a new bridge farther out, and this is going to be where the new northbound lanes are going to sit. And what they'll probably do, and I think they should do this, is if this is going to become a 6-lane highway, at least have a little bit wide enough so that they could put in some of the, at least shift this over and build a new bridge, so that if it's all connects, then there you go. You just have a big right of way in here that hasn't been touched yet. But that's one of them. This is going to be a 6-lane highway coming up to 77 in the near future, which is going to be right up here. And just because, at least at a bare minimum, and I'll probably talk about this in one of our latter videos for 35, where we talk about some of the other projects just along I-35, we'll do that. One other project that they're actually really, really close to completing is actually going to be the new frontage road bridges going over the Union Pacific north to south main line here just east of 377. So what they've done is they've shifted these probably about 60 feet outwards to its north and to its south, so that, again, in the future, you can just build out more of this bridge. And I say just build this more out because this is still a brand new bridge. I mean, I don't remember if 377 has been rebuilt here. I don't think so. I don't think 377 here has been rebuilt. So I think what will probably happen is that they're setting up this area to get a full rebuild soon. And eventually, as this is going on, they're going to look into possibly buying this out, which this is a liquor store right here, and as well as this 7-Eleven, to shift the northbound lanes outward. Now they have already started with some of this stuff. Like I would like whatever was over here has already probably been bought out, and they just need to widen this out just a little bit more. And I would believe they're gonna hopefully do the same thing down here. But I think some houses are have not been bought out yet. But like everything else, like I think Teasley still needs to be rebuilt. But however, from what it looks like, the frontage roads leading up to here have been rebuilt. But the bridge underneath either is still relatively new or just does not have any of the design characteristics of most other things. I would not be surprised if they decide to rebuild the Teasley Lane Bridge as well in this area, especially since this is going to be leading up to US 77. Now, the next big project is going to be, that is actually in the works, is between Lillian Miller Parkway, also known as State Loop 288, and Post Oak Drive. Now, what this is going to do is this is going to rebuild all of the frontage roads along here. Now, right here at Brinker, it's only going to rebuild the northbound 35 frontage roads, because at this time, when they were building this out, they had just opened up the Buc-ee's. So they were able to build out this new southbound 35 frontage road. And you can kind of see, if I can turn off the traffic layer here, you can still kind of see like that they started building this out, and they have and they've already torn out the concrete and have gotten some of the groundwork done for the new frontage road. It's kind of the same thing here. Between Brinker and Lillian Miller, they've already gotten a lot of this torn out. They've already started doing some of the groundwork. I know one of the main things they're really trying to work on is going to be from Brinker all the way down south, because they're still focusing on a lot of the utility relocations, especially on the north side, because they still have to shift, I believe, some power lines a little bit farther out, which means that they are going to have to tear out. Actually, no, I think they've already done that. So as you can kind of sort of see, they have these power lines, which are going to go a little bit farther outward, which will they have to tear out some of these trees? Maybe. I'm not 100% sure on that. Don't quote me on that. A lot. But the frontage road rebuild is going to end right here at Post Oak. And then eventually, they're going to also take a look at rebuilding I believe this is Mayhill Road, because this one is a very small bridge, and even though they did put in 4 new piers so that they could widen this highway to 8 lanes or to 6 with a dedicated exit lane, they are going to have to rebuild that bridge. And I would bet that at some point they may have to, like, I don't know if they're going to like do like a temporary bridge somewhere, or if they're going to rebuild either the southbound or the northbound frontage road bridge first. But either way, they're going to rebuild one of the lanes, so in anticipation for the eventual rebuild to an 8-lane highway with 4 toll lanes. And the segment between this entrance exit ramps here for Post Oak up to US 77 is going to see the most expansion out of any portion of not only the south segment, but the whole 28-mile corridor. Now, the next project that's in the works, and this one's actually already being worked on, and that is the Main Street intersection. So here, what they're doing is they're basically rebuilding this whole highway out while shifting the lanes outward, while shifting pretty much these lanes outward, because I believe they're not going to have enough space to be able to shift southbound Stemmons Freeway outward. So that's why it looks like at least on Google Maps, they've already done this. So they've shifted the northbound Stemmons frontage road outward throughout the whole corridor, so that they can shift the main lanes outward. And I would say this is a good thing, because what they're going to do is throughout this whole section here, they have all new steel beams there. That's what I was trying to say. They've got all new steel beams. They've already done the westbound side of this full-size bridge. They've currently got these, I believe they have this side of the piers complete. I don't think they have the street view on here as well. No, they don't even have any of that on here. But yeah, this has already been torn out, and they've got nicer stuff on there. But the same type of piers that are on the new westbound bridge are already completed here. They're just, I think they're putting in the finishing touches before they take out the rest of the decking that is used to pour on the concrete. And over here, I believe they've gotten, I don't know if they've poured the concrete and have finished it yet. Not 100% sure. I don't know if they've done that yet. But then the plan is once that's done, they're going to put in the set of concrete pillars coming up to these set of pillars and these set of pillars here. Because again, Stemmons comes all the way out to here. This is what it looks like right now. So this is one whole bridge. And then eventually they will build this out so that Main Street has a much wider right of way, and so that they can turn this into 6 lanes going over instead of 4. I mean, that is a really, really small thing there. Do I know exactly how much is left on that? I don't. And it's because from what it looks like, I do not have permission to look at any of the projects within Denton County on the Texas DOT's Dallas District's website. Now, the last segment that's being worked on in Louisville, or at least in the middle segment, is going to be from, as I said before, Fox Avenue all the way down to what is most likely Hebron Parkway. And they've already done this a good while ago. I think back in 2019 is when they bought a lot of the right-of-way here off of Lakeland Drive. So these all used to be houses. And there used to be a handful of businesses here. Like there was a gas station here. I think there was a couple other restaurants. All this right-of-way has been bought out. And what they're going to do is they're going to shift the southbound lanes up to here, because I think they're going to rebuild the Corporate Drive intersection. Whether or not they're just going to rebuild this as a new bridge, or if they're going to rebuild I-35 as a whole bridge, that would be a good question, because if they do that, then you're talking about basically closing Corporate Drive long term for several months. Now, is it a really big bridge? I mean, not really. It's a 2-lane bridge. That's why they're going to rebuild it so that they can do a 4-lane intersection here. I'm not sure I don't remember if they were going to raise this up, because this is it's not going to be a cloverleaf anymore. I don't remember if they're going to raise Stemmons Freeway up so that they'll have like a new intersection up here, or if they're going to raise 35 itself, which if they do that, that's going to take a long time and is most likely going to take several months, with the Texpress lanes most likely closing for significant time period as well. Now, that project did start back up pretty recently too. I think it started back in June with the letting date actually set for January of this past year. So January 25 was the let date for the corporate /121 business project, rebuild project. And I believe that other one in Denton, where from Lillian Miller to Post Oak, I believe that one was set for June. I think that one was set for around June. So it's been relatively quick. I don't think they're going to start till probably around January in terms of that Denton segment as to rebuilding the frontage roads, just because they're still working on utility relocations. They've already bought the right of ways, just relocating all the utilities. And then once that's done, then they'll start working on that. With that, and I believe we've already made a video on this, I do want to briefly talk about the 35 East Phase 2 project. Now, this is going to basically build up the rest of I-35 East from 635 up to just after George Bush to 4 concurrent managed lanes and 8 general purpose lanes. So this will be the full build out of I-635. And as of right now, it looks like they have at least another year till this is going to be done. So why is this going to take a little over a year? Because there's so many flyover exit and entrance ramps from the new managed lanes going outward, like going out to the frontage roads, that it's just going to take some time. And then I know they still have to basically they have to rebuild and repave the northbound lanes. They did that for the southbound lanes, but at some point they are going to have to shut down the old southbound lanes, probably shift them over onto the northbounds. Well, they're going to shift the northbound stuff. Which one would say this? Yeah. They're going to move the northbound stuff, move it over to the southbound right of way, rebuild that side so that they can also put in, I know they have one more flyover ramp that they're still working on, in, I think, just south of downtown Carrollton. But I believe they just have to basically just put in the paving work. They have to pave the managed lanes, which that'll probably still take another few months because there's still a couple of concrete towers that they need to put up so they can put in info displays and all that stuff, and then a bunch of other work there. Now, with this being one of the most substantial projects, this is an example of why it takes such a long time to build projects. Now, stuff like, again, like the North Tarrant Express, like the DFW connector, and the LBJ Tech Express projects, those were all public-private partnerships. So the private sector was able to finance most of it and then pay for construction, among other things. This is a thing where the Texas DOT has to do most of the grunt work, and they just don't have the money because, again, there's just that many projects within the state of Texas that having to do this is just going to be super, super expensive for the state of Texas. I mean, look, an almost $5 billion rebuild back in 2010 is still stupendous. That's probably closer to about like $7 or $8 billion, including like when factoring in inflation at this time. But nonetheless, I'm going to end the video here for you guys. Thank you so much for watching today's video. If you guys liked what y'all watched, make sure you guys like and subscribe down below. If you don't want to miss any more for our future videos, whether it's more automotive videos like this or any of our mountain bike videos, and I'm going to say this right now because I'm going to be working on this, any of our future transit videos. Yes, I am working on that. That will now be a monthly video that we're going to have on transit. Make sure y'all hit that bell icon down below so that you'll know when these videos drop. Because heaven forbid, I'm not going to be posting it around the same time. It's not going to be like, I'm going to post every 4 weeks for these transit videos. It's going to be on like a random Thursday for every month. I'm going to try and have it around the same time every month. I don't know exactly when every month, but it's going to be once a month. These videos are still going to be once a week just because there's just that much to talk about in North Texas, because DFW has the largest highway infrastructure within the state of Texas. So there's a lot to talk about. But again, with that, I hope you guys like this video, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. Peace.